More on this story, we can go across to France 24's Leila Molana Allen standing by in Beirut. Leila, this notice has been received. Will anything be done about it?
So this is the question. Just to be clear, this is not an arrest warrant, what's been issued today. This is a red notice. And what that essentially is an international wanted persons notice. It notifies legal authorities around the world that this person is a fugitive, that they're wanted, they're a fugitive from justice, and asks them to look for and provisionally arrest this person and then wait for either extradition or sentencing in their own country. So that's what they've received today, and it has been confirmed by the caretaker Justice Minister, Albert Serhan, that the Lebanese authorities have received that. Now, the first thing to say is that there is no question in Lebanon that Mr. Ghosn didn't enter the country legally. They have said already, General Security have said here, they have no issue with the way he entered the country, and he will not be facing any charges or any further action on that. So as far as the Lebanese authorities are concerned, they're happy for him to be in Lebanon on that count, despite the fact that we're still not entirely sure how he was able to enter on this second French passport that seems to be a mysterious figure amongst all these other passports that he has that are still being held by his lawyers. But the question is whether Lebanon is willing to work with the Japanese, what's more important to them, the Japanese relationship, or Mr. Ghosn being able to come back and live in Lebanon. Now, the first thing to say is there is no extradition treaty, so there is no strict reason why the Lebanese would have to comply and send Mr. Ghosn back to Japan to face charges. This red notice simply asks them to comply. It's not yet an arrest warrant which forces them to extradite. And of course, as I say, they don't have to because they don't have that treaty. Now, there were rumours that the President Michel Aoun had welcomed Mr. Ghosn when he got off the plane. That has been fervently denied by the President's office. So although he has received a fairly warm welcome here in Lebanon, the Lebanese authorities not going so far as to say they support him in the current circumstances. Although when he was initially charged, the Lebanese authorities did advocate for him and have constantly maintained his innocence and said that he is being used, it's a conspiracy, and he is being used as a pawn in this power play within the company with this merger between Nissan and Renault, in which he became the losing party in the eyes of many. Now, we know that he is in his wife's house in Ashtafiyeh in Beirut here, and there have been police stationed outside his house, but it does seem more for his own protection rather than in any way to try and keep track of him. And he even went so far as to have a New Year's Eve party there, which was widely known about and friends invited there. So he does seem to have settled very comfortably back into life here and doesn't seem to have much fear that he'll be sent back to Japan.
Indeed. Now, Leila, Carlos Ghosn is expected to speak next Wednesday. Do we have any idea on what he might say?
Yes, so it has been announced that he will speak. Now, the first thing is that he is also expected next week to have to face the Lebanese judiciary and ask questions about those charges that he faced in Japan. So what's unclear as yet is whether his statement, this press conference that his lawyer has announced, his Lebanese lawyer has announced next week, will come after he's spoken to the judiciary or before that to try and sort of set out his stall before he has to go and answer those questions. So that's kind of the extent to which the Lebanese judiciary here is expecting him to stand up for himself and say why he fled. What we expect to hear at this press conference really at the moment is a lot more of what we've heard from him before. He made a statement just after he arrived in Beirut saying that he had not fled justice in Japan. He'd actually fled injustice because he said there was a rigged system there. He said that the Japanese were holding him essentially because he'd been made into a hostage in what he called a politicized industrial game between these companies over this merger, and he was the losing party. And there are some aspects of the Japanese justice system that would be seen by other countries as quite difficult to cope with. For instance, the fact that they're able to interrogate suspects for hours without a lawyer present, and they're also able to hold suspects indefinitely. Mr. Ghosn's lawyers actually came out yesterday and said one of the reasons eventually that he had been forced to flee was the fact that once again his trial date had been postponed, and this seemed endless, and it seemed he was never actually going to be able to stand up and defend himself, and there would not be justice. So we expect to hear a lot more of that, and we also expect to hear from his family. Again, his wife has been very vociferous in saying that her husband has been made a scapegoat. They have suffered hugely over the last few years, and he's a Lebanese citizen and deserves to be here. So essentially, a defense of his case, a defense of himself. Now, previously, Mr. Ghosn in Lebanon had always been seen as something of a national hero. He's one of the most successful and famous Lebanese businessmen around the world. He's a great entrepreneur, which, of course, the entrepreneurial spirit is something the Lebanese are very proud of. But there's a slight change now because of these protests that have been going on for 2 months against the elites that have been ongoing here. A slight feeling now that Mr. Ghosn person, like other elites, is once again being able to use special treatment to excuse himself from what he's done. So he may not get as favourable a reaction to that press conference as he might have done last year.
We'll see what happens when he does speak next week. Leila, thank you very much for that update. Leila Molana Allen reporting there from Beirut.